Hey, this is Rorie, and welcome to the Story Behind the Album podcast style YouTube video for my second album, Stones of Remembrance. I did something similar for my first album thanks to the suggestion of a wonderful listener, so I thought it would be fun to make one for this too. I included markers down below so you can jump around to your favorites, and thank you so much for listening to these stories and for listening to the songs. I really appreciate it, and I hope you enjoy. So I'm going to start right off with the album title. The title was generally inspired by Joshua 4 in the Old Testament, where the Lord instructs the Israelites to gather 12 stones as a memorial for what God had done to help them and to be a reminder for future generations. At the time that I was writing these songs, I was also reading a book called Hinds on High Places, which is a pretty artsy story about a journey through a season of suffering and following the shepherd. And you can check it out if you want, but that story gives a nod to the Remembrance Stones as well, so it was on my mind. So the title is a reference in the way that I've seen devotionals encourage you to have your own metaphorical stones of remembrance to remember what God has done in your life and to be a reminder for future generations. And these 12 songs definitely do that for me. But the real biblical meaning shows how God cares for Israel, that they are his chosen nation and that they were then and they are now. And so we need to pray for Israel. Unseen is the first song on the album, and it was inspired by a handful of verses, which I decided I'm just going to go ahead and read. This one's probably going to be the longest one, but I figure why not? So the first verse is Romans 8:24-28, and it says, "For in this hope we were saved. But hope that is seen is no hope at all. Who hopes for what they already have? But if we hope for what we do not yet have, we wait for it patiently. In the same way, the Spirit helps us in our weakness. We do not know what we ought to pray for, but the Spirit himself intercedes for us through wordless groans. And he who searches our hearts knows the mind of the Spirit, because the Spirit intercedes for God's people in accordance with the will of God. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose." The next one is 2 Corinthians 4:16-18. It says, "Therefore we do not lose heart. Though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day. For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen, since what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal." In Romans 5:5, which has always been one of my favorite verses, says, "And hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has been poured out into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us." I've always loved that, just that hope will not put you to shame. Hebrews 11:1, "Now faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see." So I wanted to read all of those because I could probably just stop there with the description and you would see kind of where this song came from, even though it's not a direct reference. Don't just listen to my song and assume that it's the exact scripture. But those are the scriptures that inspired the concepts in this song. I wrote the song at the time that we were moving from the DC area to the Houston area. And I actually had another song that I had written with the line, "This is when hope is unseen and beautiful," way back in college. That version was kind of melodramatic, but I always liked the lyrics. So after going through a new season of life, the song just kind of rewrote itself. In the few years before that, it felt like a season of losing many things, and many things in life were really being shaken. It was during this time that I was reminded of how important it is to know where we truly put our hope. It can be easy to say that we have faith or believe when things are going well, but when it feels like everything in life is crashing to pieces, that's when our faith can really be tested. This song is an acknowledgement of those moments of surrender, when for me, I was grappling with whether or not I really believed that walking with Jesus is worth more than anything I could win or lose in this life. Because I don't think I had ever truly had a season of life where I had to think about it in this way. As a Christian, it's a beautiful reminder of eternity, because no matter what this life may bring, we can still look to eternity with our Savior and know that it is well. So that is the heart behind this song, and also a very strong theme throughout the entire album, so it made sense to make it the first song.
My soul, wait on the Lord. His peace is worth more than any weight of this world. Oh, my soul, take him at his word.
Resonate! So this album does not waste any time going deep. It doesn't really ease you into anything. It's just like, boom, here's the stuff. This is what's been going on. Here, I'm going to sing about it. Anyway, I wrote this song in my living room in 2020 during the lockdowns, at least where we lived in the DC area. There were a lot of lockdowns. So there was a lot going on. My husband and I had just been part of a really cool Bible study at our church that was about seeing Jesus in the Old Testament. I also had just finished a read-through of the Bible at this time and was just really so amazed at how from beginning to end, from Genesis to Revelation, you can see God's redemption plan. That even through all of our human messiness, he chose to live among us as a man, Jesus. And even though he was perfect and sinless, he allowed himself to be falsely accused, to die on a cross, and he rose again to pay the penalty for our sins and to allow us to have a personal relationship with himself. Romans 10:9 says that if you declare with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. So I really felt moved in this time in life to write a song that shared the gospel and the way that it resonates through hearts and also through sound waves around the world. It's not about all the good things I do, because at the end of the day, we're all sinful. Like the lyrics in the song say, I had a goal to do my best, but when I try things on my own strength, the world just comes crashing down. But it's about believing in Jesus and all that he has done, and that changes everything, honestly. It's been really cool seeing this song being played on the radio in other countries, because it reminds me that this truth, hope, and freedom is much bigger than me, and that he gets all the glory. So if you're listening to this, and you don't know Jesus, but maybe you like the song, I just want to share that it's because of his love and grace that I have hope. In the end, there's a lot of pain and suffering in this life. There are a lot of beautiful things too, don't get me wrong, but there are some moments when we just really come to terms with the brevity of life. And so, once again, this song points to the question of where do we place our hope in uncertain times? And for me, my hope is in Jesus.
Our brokenness so great. The scene, the story being written to set captives free. Let hope rise in this place and hallelujahs resonate. Death has no power in your name, Jesus, the one who saves. You are the one who saves.
So the next song is Glory, Glory, A Time Like This, which is kind of a funny title to say, but I wrote this song on Christmas Day in 2020. It was a really strange Christmas. It was very quiet. My husband and I had just been through some loss, which I'll share more about later on when I'm sharing about another song on the album. But we also had family members who were suffering illness, and it was just a sobering time. So it actually started snowing that morning. My husband went out for a run in the snow, and I was sitting on the couch in our tiny one-bedroom apartment and just picked up my guitar because I thought that maybe I would just strum some chords, kind of helps with anxiety. I had no intention of writing anything at all, but then half an hour later, I'd written this song, and I just knew that I wanted to try to record it in time for the next Christmas. So it was originally released in December of 2021 as an original Christmas song, but throughout the year, I saw that people were listening all through the spring and summer and different times of year, so I thought maybe it would work on the album too. The lyrics also reference the planetary conjunction / Star of Bethlehem that was seen in the sky just days before that, which was really significant to me because it had been such a year of isolation, and we saw many people outside looking at the star. And of course, that got me thinking about the very first Christmas and what a time it was then. So that's really what the lyrics are about.
If it was a time like this, hunger, greed, and hopelessness, it must have been a sorry state when you were born. I lift my eyes, see the star, know your love is never far, though the world feels broken as my heart. I'll sing glory, glory to the King.
Mourning into dancing. I wrote Mourning into dancing during a season of grief when I was also part of a worship dance ministry, literally. It was the first time I had, well, actually, no, I had done some worship dance ministry growing up in high school. The youth choir at my church would go on these yearly mission trips, and it was mostly music, but there was also dance involved, and sometimes they were special dances. But long story short, this came back into my life at a time when I really was not expecting it at all, and honestly was kind of shy to even be a part of it. But I realized how much, I loved worship dance, and it was really cool how God sort of brought it back in for a season. And during this season, when I was going through grief, I came across Psalm 30, 11 through 12, where David says, "You have turned for me my mourning into dancing. You have loosed my sackcloth and clothed me with gladness, that my glory may sing your praise and not be silent. O Lord my God, I will give thanks to you forever." I was really moved by that verse and found it interesting that when going through this time of both physical and emotional pain, worshiping through music and dance, and being able to dance, honestly, and not taking that for granted, was one of the few things that brought me joy. So this song is not about pasting on a fake smile, because life can be super painful at times, but it's about being in the midst of difficult circumstances and believing that when we put our trust in and follow him, Jesus will one day make all things new. And the synth in the chorus, when I was adding it in, it just sort of opened up the song to me, and I felt like I had this image of just running through a field, and I just see the sunlight and spring flowers, and it's almost like, there's a garden in the wasteland and you're just running. And I love having images like that pop into my head when I'm making a song, because it makes it really personal. And that's the synth that kind of goes da 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 da. So these are just the little things I think about when I'm recording, and that's the story behind this one.
Like the first sign of spring, you're turning morning into dancing. And there's a garden in the wasteland. Sing his praise and don't be silent.
Okay, Still Small Voice. This was the last song that I wrote for the album, and it was inspired by the story in 1 Kings 19 of Elijah hearing the still small voice of God in one of his lowest moments. And I don't want to read into the text too much and assume things, but we can tell that Elijah is in despair and that he feels alone. And so there's obviously some personal application for this song as well. And I kind of just remember, I don't even remember writing the song, to be honest. It was like one day, I was sitting on my bed and the chorus came to me, and then I don't even remember how it finished. I just remember having the song and knowing that it was going to be that last piece for this album. Fun fact about the song is that the saxophone part was played by my college RA. I had the song mostly finished, but I just really felt like it needed a saxophone part. And to me, the saxophone was almost kind of like the voice throughout the song. And it's this idea that sometimes God is all powerful, almighty, but sometimes the way he speaks to us is through that still small voice. It's not always in a loud shout. Sometimes it's in a whisper. It's not always in the earthquake or the fire, but sometimes it is just that still small voice telling you the way you should go. And so I felt like the saxophone part really brought that idea to life sonically.
There is deliverance and peace in your still small voice. You are all powerful, you are mighty.
Okay, so Hold Me Jesus is a song that I did not write. It was originally written by Rich Mullins, one of my favorite songwriters and artists. And Rich Mullins' music was actually introduced to me by my friend Maelah, who is the artist that is featured on this track. It was really a direct collaboration between she and I for this cover. But she sent me his songs way back in the day when I was first learning to write. And I was honestly kind of figure out what type of writer I was. It was a little confusing to figure out what box to fit in or not to fit into, and wanted to tell stories, but I wanted them to also be honest and also point to my faith in Jesus. And she sent me his music, and it really encouraged me over the years. And she and I also bonded over his songs for years. We would hear a new song because he has so many. If you look up his music, so many wonderful songs with deep messages, and we'd hear a new one and it would apply to something in life, and we text it to one another. So it's really fun that we worked on this together after all these years. But she was visiting me in the Houston area, and she just sat down at my keyboard in my studio and started playing an instrumental version that she was working on for this song, Hold Me Jesus. And I started singing along without thinking. Side note, she has an amazing instrumental EP called North that's out on Spotify, so definitely check that out. It's really beautiful. Beautiful instrumentation, but definitely check out her songs. When she played this instrumental of the Rich Mullins song, we kind of immediately decided we should cover this and it should be a thing. And the song actually became super real to me that summer because I ended up getting pretty sick and going through some things where the lyrics came to life so real when I was singing it, especially the part about waking up in the middle of the night and feeling the dark. And she sent me the piano track when I was in the middle of being sick. And as soon as I could sing again, I sat down and sang this. So for me personally, I can hear the emotion because I hadn't had a voice for, multiple weeks. It's just a really beautiful song. It's a really deep and honest song. It's a song that reminds us that Jesus holds us even when we have very little strength of our own, if we'll just humble ourselves and ask him to.
My Prince of Peace. Surrender, don't come natural to me. I'd rather fight you for something I don't really want than take what you give that I need. And I beat my head against so many walls. Now I'm falling down, falling on my knees.
Cry for Joy is a song that I wrote when I was going through a miscarriage. My husband and I have been through this more than once, and we have been through seasons of infertility. There are many people who go through this, and I think women often endure the pain in silence, sometimes because it can be really hard to talk about, sometimes for other reasons, but regardless, it's a painful experience that you should not have to go through alone. When I was in the hardest part of this season, especially experiencing a lot of physical pain, I looked up stories from other women and couples who had experienced this as well, and it was really comforting to me. Although it's something that I never want anyone else to have to experience, knowing that you aren't alone can really help. So that's why I share about this, even though it's kind of hard to just randomly talk about on the day-to-day, especially because it's a story that I think would be much easier to share after we have this awesome testimony about it, but it can feel very vulnerable when you're still in the middle of it. Anyway, life had been really challenging that year, and the miscarriage added a lot of stress to my life. One day I was pretty sick, and I had just forced myself to go on a walk, even though I was super nauseous. It was a cold November evening, but it was also super beautiful. That's one of my favorite times of year. So I got back into the apartment, got pretty sick, walked back into the living room, which was also the dining room and studio all in one. And I just sank down on the chair in my keyboard and just wrote the song in 10 minutes, which I actually played the song on guitar mostly, but I wrote it on piano. It's really random which instrument the songs come to life from. But anyway, it really said most of what I needed to say about life at the time. It's actually a joyful song, asking for joy and asking for help and discernment. It was a time in life when I realized that I had lost a lot of the joy that I once had. So the lyrics come from a place of brokenness, but not brokenness that is without hope. You know, joy is definitely something that is not circumstantial. Happiness comes and goes, and life can sometimes really beat you up. But we read in Galatians 5 that joy is the second fruit of the Spirit, listed right after love. So this song is about trusting in the Lord's promises and goodness, even when life gets really tough.
I'll sing with a joy deep in my heart, though I lost some along the way. I still remember your promise, and there my hope will stay. I still.
Nicodemus. So you're probably wondering why that is the title of this song, or maybe not. But I think it is one of those titles where you're looking at it and you're like, why? So I will tell you. I was reading through the Gospels, specifically in the book of John, and had this thought that I should write about Nicodemus. I was like, write about Nicodemus. And so I looked up everything that I could find about Nicodemus and thought it was really cool how John 3:16, that famous verse that almost everyone in the world knows, is in the same chapter and right after Nicodemus' secret conversation with Jesus, where he was asking him questions. And Jesus talks to him about salvation and being born again. So instead of explaining everything, I'll let you go look up those different passages if you are interested. But the song was definitely inspired by all of that. And I was kind of seeing myself in Nicodemus and realized that I didn't want to just be a secret believer. So there is personal application to it as well, with the idea of prestige or caring about your reputation. There is also that really important question that Jesus asked some of his disciples: who do you say that I am? So this song was kind of answering that question through a few different levels.
I just wanna know who you are, the great I am, healer and king. I just wanna know your truth and believe.
Okay, Night Watch. It was inspired by Psalm 63, which is a psalm that I took comfort in when I was dealing with some insomnia. And it is a psalm of David, and it said that it was written when he was in the desert of Judah. So I'll read part of it. Verse 1 says, "You, God, are my God. Earnestly I seek you. I thirst for you. My whole being longs for you in a dry and parched land where there is no water. I have seen you in the sanctuary and beheld your power and your glory. Because your love is better than life, my lips will glorify you. I will praise you as long as I live, and in your name I will lift up my hands." Jumping to verse 6, "On my bed I remember you. I think of you through the watches of the night. Because you are my help, I sing in the shadow of your wings. I cling to you, your right hand upholds me." And when I was reading my Bible notes, it was talking about how if someone's talking about thinking, of God through the watches of the night, that likely means that they're awake all night through each watch of the night. And this was specifically applicable to me because my husband for many years worked the midnight shift. And so he was on guard all night through the watches of the night. And I would often at this time be up super late, kind of teaching myself how to produce. And this song is actually one of the first songs that I figured out how to produce on my own and was just having a lot of fun with trying to figure things out. And so it's funny to me because it's almost like the default sound that I gravitate towards. That sort of there's kind of like the drama in it, and there's also a funny story about the strings part. I would work on the song, give it a break, then put it on my phone and go for a walk outside to clear my head and to try to listen to the mix and try to listen to the parts and figure out what I was doing. And one day I was walking and I heard this tone and I just thought it sounded so beautiful, but I was like, I don't remember putting that in the song. And so I took my earphones out and I heard that I was walking by this other apartment building tower and it had like this huge machine hooked up to it. I don't know what it was for, but it was doing some type of construction and it had a tone that was in the same key as the song playing at the same time. So I put my headphones back in and I was like, oh, that actually sounds really good. So I did not make a sample of that sound, but I did go home and write out the part for real. So that's just a little side note about how that part came to be.
We're held within your hands through the watches of the night. I remember who you are, the creator of all life. Doesn't leave us in the dark.
Headlines was written in January 2021. There is a very personal experience that prompted me to write it, but overall, it's a song about having overwhelming access to so much news, information, and opinions, which is not bad in itself, let me be clear, but learning to listen for the voice of truth in the midst of it all. A lot of times the news talks about all of the bad things that are happening, and we sometimes miss the moments of redemption that are still taking place at the same time. And those are often the things that aren't broadcasted. And so that's the overall heart of the lyrics to this song. The bridge of the song talks about an experience that I had on a youth mission trip when I was in high school. We were singing a program, and afterwards there was a man who asked to speak with me. He was hooked up to a lot of machines and spoke some life and encouragement over me that I remembered all of those years later when I was going through a very difficult time of discernment and processing everything that was happening, when it was affecting my family and I in a personal way. And some of the words that he said are recorded in the song, and I've never forgotten it. So you never know what an impact just a few words of kindness might make on someone's life or how it may help them years later. Headlines is a really special song to me and just reminds me of the verse, "You will know the truth and the truth will set you free."
Then you're running straight for me. With the honest truth that can restore my life. Your love is better than I knew. The rescue and the world, and it should make it last. Help me fix my eyes on you, author of redemption and creator of time.
Dear Life. So the story behind this song is best shared through a little background on the life story of missionary and painter Lilias Trotter. She lived between the years of 1853 and 1928. I was generally inspired to write the song after reading a biography about her life, which I've read more than once. I liked it so much, and I was personally inspired by the way she compared her faith walk to that of birds living on her roof and eagles learning to fly. She has a lot of amazing quotes, which I included when I was writing about this on the second album website. But I'll share briefly here. She was a really talented painter who followed a calling to be a missionary in Algeria. She never stopped painting and writing, but she also found creative ways to use her passion for art to share the gospel. And she also specifically inspires me because she had a health condition which prevented her from passing the exams to go with a certain missionary team. So she and her friend pulled together their own resources to go anyway, traveling alongside but not officially part of the existing team. And this was definitely super risky as a woman or as anyone in this time period and the time period that she lived and traveled. She wrote thoughts like, "Truly, if God needed weakness, he had it." So I was really encouraged by her story and the way that she wrote. She wrote in that very artsy, whimsical way a lot of times. And She often references the verse from Moses' song in Deuteronomy, where she depicts where the Bible depicts the Lord's care for Israel to the way that an eagle teaches their young to fly. First, they have to stir the nest and make it less comfortable so the eagles will want to leave, and then the birds are picked up on the mother's wings, flown for a bit, then tossed into the open air. And while they're falling, the mother swoops down to catch them. She also shares a similar but different analogy to the birds living on the roof of her house. One of my favorite lines is from this quote in her journal when she says, "So we need not wonder if we are not allowed to stay long in level, sheltered places. Our faith wings are like the martins and mostly need the gulf of some emergency to give them their start on a new flight. We will not fear when we feel empty air under them." So this is why we won't be surprised if we take flight, the lyric in the song. The song is not a direct reference, but it was inspired by this concept and things that were taking place in my life at the time that I wrote it. And it's really a song about trust and about surrender.
Like the eagle stirs the nest from comfort zone to wilderness, learning to fly. Won't be surprised.
State of Heart Epilogue is the last song on this album, and it really sums up the message in a lot of the songs. It is inspired by a quote from Corrie ten Boom. Her autobiography and book, The Hiding Place, is heartbreaking and sobering and also inspiring. A quick recap is that she worked with her father and her sister and other family members and helped hide many Jewish neighbors of theirs from the Nazis during the Holocaust and World War II by hiding them in their home. And they were caught. She spent time in prison and then later concentration camp. Her father and sister both passed away in the camps, and she ended up being released by a clerical error. You can read all about it in the book. Like, it definitely shares it way better than I could here. But she went around speaking for years after that about her experience and what had happened and the realities. She had seen some of the darkest things that man can do to each other, and yet she still had faith in God. And so the quote that this song is inspired about really points to that and her outlook on life. The train sound is a reference to an analogy that she made in the book as well, which I highly recommend reading it to find out. But there's a lot of pressure sometimes to hide away from the realities of the world, but that's not really a way to live. But it's also not being consumed by the world either, but being in the world and not of it. And so this song talks about the idea that the state of my heart can't be measured really by what's going on around me or even within me, but when giving it to God, that's when we can find peace regardless of the circumstances. And I want to grow in this. I have said many times this past year that I've written these songs, but I need to actually believe the lyrics that I'm writing and live it out. And it's really interesting how the songs have been speaking to me maybe the most. So that's really the posture that I have when sharing this album. And this song, State of Heart, is really the heart behind all 12 of the songs that are a part of it.
It's not how life's supposed to be when I look up. Oh, look to God, I find rest. Finally, my soul knows love that enters in the mess. So the state of my heart is a
Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for listening to these stories and for listening to the album. I wanted to quickly share about a couple things on the horizon. I'm going to be releasing another Christmas cover in November. And then after that, I have a new project that I've written and have started to record. So hopefully I'll be able to start sharing some of that with you soon. But if you like what you hear, please subscribe so that you can receive notifications when those releases drop. In the meantime, thank you so much for your support. Thank you for listening to the album, and God bless.